Now you have to wait until 2028 when they decide to release an actually sustainable amount of GPUs to the non-miners. Isn't NVIDIA releasing a GPU which is custom-made to be shit for miners? Fingers crossed that helped out. Yes, but that still won't help out. Miners prefer using the gaming cards because they can dump them on the secondary market after they are done with them. The cards NVIDIA released for mining have no display ports, so no secondary market for them. They're essentially a slightly better Tesla series GPU. Adding into the issue is that there is a silicone shortage affecting pretty much every industry. There are GM trucks sitting in a lot waiting for electronics to be installed, which will be a good while due to the shortage. Came here to say this. NVIDIA fucked up and circumvented their own security. Probably asked him on what drugs he's on. Him, hydroxychloroquine. I'm really proud of reading that in one go and not stuttering. Technically the truth. Him, Pfizer. Ha ha ha. This comment made my night. I would have said something like, okay thanks I guess. You should really tell someone who can actually do something about that though. Scientists have been telling people who could have done something for decades, and what did they do? There were numerous very specific articles published by scientists, intelligence agencies and even Defense Department officials forecasting a SARS-CoV virus that could have an effect very similar to the one we're experiencing that originated from wet markets in southern China. Some of these reports date back to as late as 2005 if I recall correctly. I may have the exact year off by 1 or 2, and all three groups made suggestions to the U.S. government, the military and lawmakers about how we should prepare a response if this occurred, and leadership decided the response was too expensive and ignored the problem. I got a bit of warning from the conspiracy kooky on YouTube who I didn't take too seriously until the momentum had sped up a bit. That gave me more confidence when local news began showing up. I'm a pensioner but I warned my family to start stocking up. They didn't believe their own father. They, shock horror, didn't even believe the internet. They didn't decide to do anything until suddenly there was no toilet paper. Now how the frack do you expect anybody to believe in their ravings of a WTF time-traveling harbinger of doom? They tried telling Bill Gates and no one listened to him. I feel like this is pretty true to what I would do. Fuck off weirdo. Assume someone you knew traveled time and told you, how would you react then? Fuck off friendo. I'm not your friendo, guyo. I'm not your guyo, palo. I would have posted it on Twitter or on Reddit, so that 10 years later people could find it and some news stations could have invited me to explain how I predicted everything in such detail. Maybe if I also get some information on which corporations make big profits from the pandemic, I could have invested. What if the whole post is a post for the 10 years to come pandemic? You should have to be specific. It's not like pandemics weren't predicted prior, but you're just begging for the butterfly effect and the virus wouldn't happen. The bat-eating guy would be like, hold on a second, after he just saw your tweet aimlessly scrolling through random Twitter accounts and not gone through with it. I doubt anyone would even see my tweet. Nobody even sees my tweets now. It wouldn't have made any difference. Save every penny until mid-March and buy stocks. Would have made a killing. That's what I was thinking. I came here to say just that. Stocks only go up, but some stocks go more up than others. I wouldn't have bought a downtown apartment at the beginning of 2019. I would have been way happier with more space after everybody stopped going into the office, and my property value here took a hit when everyone started trying to move out of the downtown area. Oh, don't worry, the property value is going back up at an unprecedented speed, until the bubble busts, that is. Shorted a bunch of stock right before it hit, like politicians did. Now. Many of them bought Amazon as well. John Titor warned us about an upcoming pandemic, though it was mad cow and not a respiratory ailment, and nobody took it seriously. Mainly because nobody takes the existence of time travel seriously. I probably would try to educate people but would likely be seen as a nutter. Personally, if I was told about the pandemic, I think I would have been bolder in my career and pushed myself more. I would go to the beach more. I would collect recipes of how to substitute items of food when cooking. I would slowly but surely fill a room with toilet paper. I would have had the guts to divorce my wife when it became abusive the first time. I would spend more time with my mother. I would care less what strangers thought about me but value the opinions of those I love. I would visit Iceland. I would be nicer to my neighbors, they will become allies when lockdown hits. Move to New Zealand. Damn. I never thought of this but it makes all the sense in the world, because when it comes to the pandemic, that's where all of the sense in the world is located. Yeah, I was thinking stayed in Australia. I moved back to Canada to try to keep my residency for 2 years instead of staying in Oz with my partner. Well, those 2 years turned into however the fuck long this lasts plus the year before. And with how hard Canadians are fucking this up, my desire to be one of them has waned greatly. On behalf of Canada, that fucking sucks and we're sorry. Is Canada fucking up as bad as the US? Gaben knew, actually extremely difficult to do. Short term, easy, long term, hard. How so? I'm looking to leave the USA in a few years and NZ is one of my top candidates. It's very difficult to immigrate to NZ. Getting the right to work in many countries is not easy without citizenship. The US has big hurdles to do so as well, even with the right education and some wealth. NZ makes it generally easy for young people to spend time there working but it's very temporary. I looked into it a while ago in reaction to them being the happiest country. I don't have recent, more specific info. Basically, immigration most places is hard, even if you're white with money. You shouldn't believe it becomes easy just because of those factors. Traveled more, definitely traveled more and not postponed some of my destinations. Travel will not be the same for like a good 5 years. New York in December. Hawaii in January. Oklahoma in February and COVID hit in March. I couldn't have had it any better I guess. This happened. It was called SARS. Some countries listened. And MERS. Also, they kept going on about it in things like National Geographic. My mom reads that. And there was that time in 1918. It really shouldn't have been unexpected. My country did not listen. Yes, I don't think a global pandemic like COVID would be that surprising. We've had warnings about exactly this kind of pandemic since at least the 90s. Why would one extra person have changed anybody's choices? Any idiot can say a pandemic is going to hit at some point in the future. Heck, I can tell you that a different pandemic will hit the world at some point before the year 2500 and I would be right. Since I have no information of worth to tell you what to do to protect yourself, or even what it will be or when, then my info is just as worthless as the countless other predictions you have heard throughout your whole life. It would be like me telling you that at least one stock is going to go up next week, but not which stock. There is a high chance that I am right. But without knowing which stock is going up I am not really helping you. If you shotgun blast darts if you are going to hit the board, SARS, bird flu, swine flu, the writing was on the wall. It was always a matter of time before something came out that was both contagious enough to spread far and wide and dangerous enough to motivate this kind of response. Even now, I'd say we got lucky. Pandemics of the past resulted in much higher % of the population being killed. You just repeated the same thing the other person said. Those type of pandemics happened all through the 20th century. Just flu alone there was like 8 or 9. It's easy to say a major pandemic is coming because, yeah, statistically one happens pretty frequently. But the seriousness is basically impossible to predict. Notice how most scientists don't give a time frame prediction. It's always in the future because they don't actually know. They're just saying something super basic. I watched an explained episode or that of some similar show a few months before the end of 2019, and the episode was about widespread diseases and pandemics. They cited that experts claimed something like the chances of a global pandemic are much higher right now due to people traveling at a greater rate, the ways food industries work, the lack of precautions, immunization and sterilization, and how long it has been since the last significant pandemics. Greater than totally paraphrasing from what I remember, I would have changed all of my investments all at the right time. Sold the stocks that tanked travel-related stocks, bought stocks in companies like Zoom, and medical supply companies, and then repurchased the stocks that tanked at a discount. Considering that I was 7 at the time, I probably would have been very confused and promptly forgotten about it, and then remembered it in a kind of am I going crazy or is this an actual memory of mine? Way when the pandemic eventually got here, Would have stocked up on masks and Lysol wipes sooner. Not to resell them at huge profits, just for my own needs. In my country it got cheaper with the pandemic, since the government ordered supermarkets to sell them for their own purchase and logistics cost only. They actually only cost between 10 and 30% of what they did cost before the pandemic. And there was always enough soap in stock. Cost wasn't so much of an issue as people buying way more than necessary, causing temporary shortages all the time. I remember seeing shopping carts stuffed with toilet paper. Like, bro, the toilet paper factory will ship out some more in like a week, chill out on that. What I never understood is there was never a danger of stores shutting down. And like you said, there was never some idea that the TP factories were stopping production. We didn't get hit by an EMP bomb. It was a virus. That wasn't particularly known to cause diarrhea or something. Nobody was shitting much more than their average amount. Over this past year, I went to the store just as much as I normally do. The only thing that caused a problem was the people hoarding certain supplies. People panicked and wanted to hunker down. Unless you were old enough to be around in the 1920s when the influenza outbreak happened, and those people would have been babies, the only experience people had with this stuff was from movies and books. And probably more than half of those pandemic movies were zombie ones. No one knew what to expect or how serious it was, so they wanted to be prepared to have to stay home as long as possible, bunker style. That's why non-perishable staples ran off the shelves too. No one thought our food sources were gonna vanish, they just wanted to have the ability to stay home as long as possible. Yeah, and toilet paper are very large and not very expensive, and I expect they're normally sold in a very predictable amount. There's probably not a lot of it stored in any given supermarket. I would have bought a lot of stock in toilet paper and medical supplies. I'd buy J&J, Pfizer, AstraZeneca, etc. stonks, and held them. Also, would have purchased a carton of N95s. It was really shitty using the same damn box of them for a whole year before supplies eased up. No, I did not donate them because if you walk into a clinic with a box of N95s that sat in an open box in the garage, they'd say thanks and discreetly throw them in the trash. The pharmaceutical stocks did nothing besides go sideways. Minor movement compared to remote technology stocks like Zoom flew through the roof. Good point. Someone else mentioned Amazon, too, made a post on Tumblr about it, then don't touch the account for 10 years, then reblog it with told you take a screenshot, post to our Tumblr, get famous, don't say anything about future events afterwards, but phrase everything else in such a way that, if people assume I can see into the future, my posts come off as prophecies. At the time I was doing tech support at my university's engineering college. I would have tried to get a solid certification in communications and video conferencing, and try to get a position in our distance education service. Although, as it is, I was laid off after the start of the Great Recession. I'd also set a calendar item to remind me that I should buy into Zoom. I would have worked very hard to improve my public speaking and PowerPoint skills so that I could get the sheeple to understand that pharma companies are finning us over, with lockdowns, disinformation on cheap generic COVID cures, negotiating no liability in case things go south, just so the execs can get their Bahamian dollar bonuses, bought stock in companies that provide virtual communication capability. IEMS Teams, Microsoft, Zoom, etc. I would like to say I would have tried and help world governments prepare or help the Chinese government contain it to only Wuhan. But I can't do that because it would have a far too unpredictable and negative effect on the timeline that I could only reasonably take a few self-preservation measures. I wouldn't have tried to help world governments get ready for it because I am a nobody and they would have had no more reason to believe me than they would any other random person. Even if I could prove the existence of my time-traveling friend, I wouldn't because the panic that would cause would kill a lot more people than corona. They don't even listen to their own experts. I would never have taken the job I took at the end of 2019. I took out a loan and a credit card in order to move to a new city. Then the pandemic hit and I was suddenly stuck paying £1,100 a month in rent whilst on reduced hours. My big opportunity for a well-paid job actually cost me money. Well, if they also told me when it would happen, I would be a multi-millionaire. The stock market swung wildly last year and the right combination of puts and calls could have grown a fortune 1000x. TBH probably would have disregarded it because at that time my mind couldn't process COVID's impact on everything. I'm in Nevada and never thought it was possible for the casinos to be closed. That was quite surreal when they were all shut down, and the parking lots barricaded.